And we're back live for another UFC Fight Night show. Two-man booth here for DOLIDZE VETTORI Fight Night. And I got my boy Dan back with me today. Dan, what's going on, man? You ready for 13 fights tonight?
Yeah, the world's most famous Apex. I'm ready for the fucking the electric atmosphere of a warehouse in the middle of the desert. No, it's always a good time when we got fights. It's not quite last week's card. It's not quite some of the upcoming cards, but we got fights, man. And I don't know. The matchmaking here is a little suspect. We got a lot of big favorites, so we're probably going to see some violence. Probably going to see quite a few knockouts, which is always fun.
I was gonna say I'm okay with a bunch of knockouts. You get, that's fine with me. So
You got some
yeah, I'm good to go. I'm ready. I hope we see some violence here. Spencer, I am just recovered. Yes, I am recovered. But yeah, I had a nice weekend last week in Florida. Appreciate JBC for holding it down. How'd you guys do? Did you guys give out any best bets? How'd you guys do last week? I didn't get to watch the show, obviously.
I don't remember what JBC's best bet was, but mine was Pereira, so that didn't go so good.
I had him, unfortunately, Dan. So what'd you think of the fight overall? What'd you think of the fight? I think Ankalaev probably should have won the decision. What'd you think of it overall?
Yeah, I was hoping that the judges would be a little like deferential to the champ, just like personally, but I thought Ankalaev won. I thought it was a good decision. I thought it was just kind of a weird performance by him. Like I've never really seen him. Like I've heard some rumors that Pereira had like norovirus and possibly a broken hand. I don't know if those have been substantiated, but
it felt weird, Dan, because it felt like in spots where he had openings to throw, he wasn't throwing. And I was like, he was just kicking. And I was like, in my head, before I even heard any of those rumors, in my head watching the fight, I was saying, is something wrong with his hands? Yeah. Like, is one of his hands hurt? Because it felt like it watching the fight. I'm just watching him just kick and kick and kick. And I'm like, what's going on?
It was really strange. And it's like, the first thought is, oh, he's afraid of the takedown. And that's why he's not being more aggressive. But he defended the takedowns fine. He didn't get taken down a single time. But, he let Ankalaev just hold him up against the cage and control him there. And yeah, just kind of a weird fight. I think I'd probably still take Pereira in the rematch, just assuming that something was up with him this last time. But, congratulations to Ankalaev. Like, he deserves it. Probably should have gotten the title shot way sooner. If he had lost, he probably is not sniffing another title shot maybe ever. So good for him for,
especially with that performance. No way Dana was like, yeah, I definitely want to see that again, but he's got to do it again because, Pereira. So
did you see the clip of, I think it was Buffer showing him like the decision, and he goes from like, cause he probably thought he's all excited. And
yeah, even though I did think, and I had Pereira too, like you, but I did think watching the fight, I was like, it should probably go to Ankalaev. It's not like he did anything like dominant. He literally held him up against the cage for like 2 rounds. It's like, okay, like if it went to Pereira, I've seen way worse decisions, like way worse robberies. So in my head, I was like, they could still give this to Pereira. It wouldn't shock me if 2 judges just decided to give it to him, but it was probably the right decision.
I was hopeful, but when they read the decision, I was like, that makes sense.
My best bet was my biggest bet was Bruno, which hit, and I went against my Armenian brother because I knew Bruno it was going to be too much for him because he had the wrestling in his pocket if he needed to, plus the power.
He got pretty lucky there. He got pretty lucky there with that sub. Like when it got into the later rounds, and he was just fucking winging.
But that was my point, though. Was he could go to wrestling if he needed to. You know what I mean? Where in certain other fights, like, Armin, if he gets hurt, he can't go to wrestling. Like Bruno could go to wrestling. It was like his first matchup in a while where like he had that advantage. And I was like, okay, like if the power doesn't get there, like I think he could take him down. find a finish there, and he did. So I didn't bet the sub, but I had a nice bet on him for the money line. So yeah, it was nice that he got that done. I was pretty happy about that. But new card, new fights to talk about here. Dan, 13 fights on the card, and like you said, some big favorites. Now there is some line movement on some of these big favorites. In the first fight actually of the night, I'm pretty sure the dogs starting to get a little steam a little bit with Yanisi Dubin versus Carly Judice. Judice 9,300 on DraftKings. Dubin 6,900 on DraftKings. But the line has moved kind of a little in favor of Dubin, just a little bit. With honestly, she looked pretty good on the scales. If you watched her in the Contender Series fight when she came out, even though she had the badass knockout, and if you haven't seen it, you should probably go back and watch it because it's a quick knockout and it's pretty badass. She didn't look like super in shape, Dan. So I was interested to see the fight go a little longer to see how her gas tank would hold up. But on the scale, she looked like she got in really good shape, which I think is huge for this fight because Carly is pressure. She has power. I think she has skills. I think she could try and take her down if she wanted to. But Carly has lost 2 decisions, and they were very close decisions that, honestly, she could have easily won. The split against Cachoeira, I think, and the Hernandez fight where she took a lot of big shots and stayed up, and she gave a lot of good shots as well and lost, in my opinion, a pretty close decision. So this is going to be a cool fight. I think it's the pressure of Judice against, probably the power of Dubin. But what do you see here, Dan, especially with this line moving a little in Dubin's favor? How are you going about approaching it for DFS?
Yeah, we've got 3 women's fights on the card. They're all pretty early. They're all pretty low level. This is probably the most interesting just because both of these girls, they are all offense and no defense. Like Judice, she lost to Hernandez last time out, which you mentioned. She still scored 83 because she just put up an insane amount of striking volume, like 186 strikes. She mixed in 2 takedowns, didn't really do much with them. But Judice is just she's the type of fighter that you want to target both sides of her fights because she's just going to go out there and throw, and she does not care about defense at all. So on the Dubin side, I know there's a lot of steam coming in on her, but Dubin's resume, the overhand right that she landed on Contender Series was great. Super fun knockout to watch. And her opponent in that fight, Shannon Clark, has had some success in LFA. She's a solid fighter. Dubin was, I think, a plus 1,000 underdog.
Huge. Yeah.
So it's definitely on the table. But her previous competition to that, they were all 0-0. None of them had ever had an MMA fight before. So I think calling those pro fights is kind of generous. But for 6,900, she's got some power in her hands, and these two are just going to probably go out there and swing on each other. And it sounds weird to say for a women's fight, but they're probably just going to swing on each other until someone drops. So I'm super interested in both sides of this fight. Judice rates out really well for me. I think I might be a little low on her ownership. I've got her at 22%, but I think people are probably going to realize and come around to the fact that she just produces a ton of offense, and her inside the distance number has actually come down. She's plus 150 inside the distance, which isn't amazing for her price, but in a vacuum, it's a pretty solid inside the distance number, especially for a women's fight. So I'm really interested in Judice, and I'm going to mix in Dubin just because, I think either one of these ladies can get dropped.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on a lot of what you said, especially from a DFS perspective. I think, this is definitely a fight where you should target a little bit of both sides here. This is a good fight. I do think we could see a finish too. I really like Carly, though. The amount of volume that she's put up in losses is pretty impressive. 83 DraftKings points in a loss, Dan.
It's
Like,
wild.
how many in a 3-round fight too? In a 3-round
Yeah.
fight, how many times do you see 83 points in a loss?
Really.
That's pretty wild. She's 9,300, and we know those significant strikes for the females, whether you like it or not. It's just the truth, but they get them all. All right. Whoever does the significant strikes for the females, they are biased. And so for DraftKings, though, we can, capitalize on that. And I think this is one of those fights where you should just go in. I really like Carly, though. I think I'm going to be, heavier on her. I do think she wins. I just think that her level of competition and the fact that she's lost 2 straight closely lined fights where, I mean, she was a dog. She was just like, she was throwing, getting tagged, and not really caring about what's coming out. I think the pressure ultimately, though, is going to be what wins Carly this fight. Because I think she's just going to stay on the gas the entire time. And I do think that she could use takedowns. She did use takedowns in her last fight. It was just kind of a little too late, I feel like, when she started to implement them. But I think she could implement them a little sooner if she wanted to in this fight. Anything else, Dan, from like an ownership perspective?
No, I just think Judice is like probably far more skilled. She's got a pretty poor resume too, but she at least has like 2 fights against Caracate and Hernandez, who are UFC level.
They're solid. They're solid. Yeah. Fernandez has power. Caracate, not as much power, but more like the volume, move forward type striker, right? So, kind of similar styles, I guess, that clash. But I'm with you. Redmond says over under 120 significant strikes on DK.
I mean, if you think it goes to decision, then I would hit the over. But I think there's a fairly good chance because, again, like neither of them defend themselves. So like,
so you're going to see them rack up significant strikes unless someone gets finished.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, if you don't see a finish here, I'm going over on that. That's going to be a nice over for sure. Angela says us women should not be fighting for a profession. Hey, this is 2025. All right. You guys can do what you want. And we appreciate it either way, even if it's, lower level women's MMA. So
probably DC's burner.
Yeah, might be DC's burner. No one hates women's fights more than DC. Like the problem is though, Dan, we got 3 of them. And honestly,
they're all good.
I could see 2 of the fights finishing inside the distance, like which to me is a little shocking because normally I would never say that with a lot of these women's fights, but I could actually see it. So
yeah, the other one you're talking about. Well, we're actually going to get to it next, right? Nunes and Cachoeira.
We are.
Yeah.
So let's get to that fight. We actually agree on this fight, which doesn't happen all the time. We both have Judice, I think, winning. And we both like the fight for DFS. Let's go to Cachoeira, 7,700 on DraftKings versus Nunes, 8,500 for Nunes, Dan. Yeah, you got a point?
Yeah, Steve's just asking if we can stack the fight. No, I mean, I don't like, especially on a 13-fight card. Even on a 10-fight card, I'm basically never stacking fights. I get the idea, but you're probably going to want 6 winners.
Think about it. 8,300 in a loss, Dan. If she was 7,200 like she was last time out, you'd be like, okay, I could take, she's 9,300. So you need more probably than 83, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's if like, she obviously lost the decision, but scored, 83 or something. So I'm just making the point, like, I think you're going to need more than that from 9,300. So yeah. And we don't stack fights anyways, really ever.
And with Dubin, you would need her to put up a ton of striking volume in a loss. And then you also just need the rest of the dogs to fail, which I don't use the dogs on this card, but it's not very often that like no dogs win.
And again, we're going to get to a lot of these favorites, Dan, but it's not like a lot of these favorites are like world beaters in any way. I mean, this is like a little bit of a low level card in general. So even these big favorites, they're not like amazing. I can poke holes in all these big, and we'll do it. We're gonna poke holes in some of these favorites, or at least I will poke holes in some of these favorites. And I do think that we're gonna see a dog or two come out of nowhere and win on this card, just because it is kind of a little lower level. But let's get to this second of three women's fights here: Nunes and Cachoeira. The line's kind of moving in Cachoeira's favor, I think, Dan. She was plus 140 this morning on DraftKings Sportsbook, which I think moved a decent amount in a day or two. But what do you see here? Because I see two strikers that are probably not going to grapple a lot, and both have power for females to get it done.
Yeah, and I actually think Cachoeira probably has more knockout upside here. Her inside the distance line is slightly better. Nunes is going to be dependent on a knockout. So she's like, I don't think Nunes can get there just on volume alone. She doesn't throw quite enough, though she does throw like a good amount. This is actually probably the best matchup that Cachoeira has had in a while. Like her last two fights, she went up against, grapplers in Maverick and Jazz, where her grappling and wrestling defense is basically non-existent. And once she gets on her back, she's completely helpless. Like you saw Jazz beat the absolute piss out of her. And I think, Maverick, same deal. Both put up massive scores, but
how'd they not stop that fight sooner? That Jasmine fight was just, she had her against the cage at one point, just pounding her face into the cage. And I'm like, at what, and that was in like round one, I think. At what point do they just let this girl just keep getting pounded? And she made it almost all three rounds. I mean, she got subbed kind of late, I think, in the third, but she was getting destroyed.
Well, and you'll remember too, Cachoeira actually, she pulled some like dirty weight cutting shit where she didn't make weight, but she also didn't notify Jazz's team with enough time to like let her stop cutting the weight. So she like let Jazz do the whole weight cut. And then at the last minute was like, hey, can we do this at 135? So Jazz was also super pissed. Like you could tell she was fucking angry. And she like took it out on Cachoeira's face. Yeah, dude. It's just like Cachoeira's defense everywhere is pretty bad. So despite these inside the distance lines, like not being super great, like I'm not going to go overboard just because I really do like other stuff in this mid-range better, but there's definitely potential for a finish here on either side because both of them have pretty solid power. I think we both pick Cachoeira. And again, it's like she's serviceable. Like she's got power on the feet is basically what it comes down to.
And you broke it down perfectly, Dan. Like this is the best matchup she's had in a while. Nunes isn't going to take her down. This isn't going to be like the last time she faced a striker, she won. It's like she's faced, in the wrestling and grappling matchup, she loses. Like just like you said, this is not one of those matchups though. I think it's way more advantageous for Cachoeira to, with her style, to be able to have success. And on top of it, it's not like she's losing to like bum grapplers or wrestlers. Like that, Jasmine's a beast. Maverick's solid. Robertson's an amazing grappler. Like we're not talking about girls that are just not like cans, like low-level cans that she's like getting whooped by. And on top of it, you can make the case like the girls Nunes has fought, like competition-wise, aren't even close to the girls Cachoeira's fought. So I'm on the dog. I bet the dog. And I do think from a DFS perspective, I'm probably just gonna stay on either Cachoeira or fading Nunes. Like I don't want Nunes at 8,500. Cachoeira could get there in a decision. I still think she probably needs a finish too, but
at 7,700, she's one of the more expensive dogs, not quite cheap enough. I mean, she doesn't really throw a whole lot of volume. It's just that she throws with power.
That's the problem. She throws with power. So, I think I'm gonna be on that side. Are you gonna play any Nunes, or are you just on the Cachoeira side as well?
Yeah, right now I'm getting a little bit of Nunes, but there's just better options up in her price range. So I'm not gonna get there too much. I'm gonna have more Cachoeira probably, most likely.
And Dan, who do you have winning the fight?
Cachoeira.
Oh, babe, we're 2 for 2 so far. How is that possible? That might have never happened in the history of a UFC show with me and Dan. We're on the same side for the first 2 fights. This is crazy. Something's got to end here, Dan. Let's go to the next fight. Maybe we'll figure this thing out. Daniel Barz. What?
We're on the same side on a lot of these. I'm just scrolling through, looking at.
Oh, you're scrolling through right now? Well, okay. We might have a different show here. Daniel Barz versus Andre Lima here. Lima 9K on DraftKings. Barz 7,200. Last time out, Lima showed off his wrestling and his grappling against Dos Santos. Kind of won him the fight. Did not love the pressure and kind of went to the wrestling and grappling when he realized, especially in the second round, that he had the advantage. Definitely was more position over like submission or, ground and pound. I mean, Andre Lima is one of those guys that he wants to pressure you, but it's more like empty pressure. It's not like he's throwing a ton of volume at you. He's trying to catch you. He's trying to hit you with that big shot. So you're going to see like the volume numbers aren't good with Lima. So that goes to low scores. A lot of times he is 9K. So you do want an opponent who's going to be all pressure. And he does have that opponent, Dan. Daniel Barz is one of those guys where he wants to pressure you, but he's all pressure and it's not empty pressure. He's throwing, he's trying to hurt you. So this might like fit for Andre Lima style of kind of a catching someone, like counter striking and catching him with that big shot, even though Barz is tough. The gas tank kind of fell out towards the end, especially that third round, but Barz, the first 2 rounds looked really good against Alta Moreno. This is an interesting fight. I mean, the line is going in Lima's favor. I think it just keeps going towards Lima. I do think Lima probably wins a decision here, but from a DraftKings perspective, how are you going about it? Because Lima has not scored well really in his first 3 fights in the UFC.
Except for the time he got bit. I mean, even that wasn't.
I don't even count that one. And he was 9K. So did he score like that well?
89. No, I don't think he was optimal. When I first wrote this fight up, I didn't really have too much interest in either side because, it projects to both of these guys are really talented, skilled kickboxers. And even though Lima has a BJJ black belt, you said like last fight, he did a little bit more of the wrestling, but he has no submission wins on his record. So we haven't really seen all that much wrestling or grappling upside from him, but this is a pretty interesting matchup and that Barz has been pretty vulnerable on the mat. So like if Lima wanted to notch his first submission win, this seems like it would be a really good matchup for it. You mentioned the low volume. Both of these guys, they don't really, Barz is more aggressive, but he still doesn't really throw all that much volume. And if this is going to play out entirely on the feet, then you're going to need a finish from either one of these guys. And originally, I was not super interested in either side because Lima's inside the distance was pretty poor. It was like plus 265. But when I finished writing everything up and I went to go update the odds, not only had the money line moved like drastically in Lima's favor, but now the inside the distance number is plus 160, which is much better. So if he doesn't get steamed in ownership, and I don't expect him to get too steamed, he's going to be one of the lower owned options in the 9K range. And given the line movement, I'm far more interested now as just like having him as kind of a low owned pivot up top who can finish the fight. And Barz,
he almost got his first submission win last time against Dos Santos. He had that. He literally had twice. He had his arm under the neck and had like, the choke in, and Dos Santos did a really good job, even though his face was like purple, of fighting the hands and somehow didn't get subbed, but that was really close. I think though the reason why this dude doesn't really have any submission wins is clearly because it's not that he's not capable. It's clearly because in most of his fights so far, he's had such an advantage on the feet. that he hasn't need to go to it. That last fight, though, showed you that he can go to it and he can control people. And he can, try and find submissions if he wants to do that. It's just going to depend on how aggressive, because he's really not that aggressive. Like in the last fight, I think it was round 2. This dude had Dos Santos mounted for 2 minutes straight to end the round. And I didn't see one like big elbow. I didn't see one like massive. He didn't like posture up at all to try and like throw down. And he had him mounted for 2 minutes. Like that's a lot of time. So that just tells you how he's very cautious about these positions.
He's capable of knocking people out too. Like he knocked his last 3 wins before going on the Contender Series were all like round 1 or round 2 finishes by knockout. So he's capable. I think what also helps here in this particular matchup is, like I mentioned before, Barz is aggressive. So even if Lima is sort of content to like hang out on the outside and just kickbox his way to a decision, like Barz might force the issue here and force Lima to knock him out, which would be great.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting too, because both guys want to pressure up against the cage. That's both what they like to do. So it's going to be interesting to see which one, it kind of wins that battle and is doing it. I feel like Barz is more aggressive, and I do think that's going to force more of the grappling and takedowns from Lima again. So I think we could see some of that again. But I think we agree. We both have Lima winning this fight. Pretty sure. And Dan, you said you like him more just because of the lower ownership, which kind of makes sense in DFS. I mean, 9K range. If he's going to come in lower owned, I would totally get it. I'm probably going to be lower on the fight in general, but I don't mind the sub. The idea of betting the sub number. I mean, let's see what it is right now on DraftKings. Let's see. It's got to be big. Plus 600. I thought it would be a little bigger than that, but it's still sprinkle on that. Plus 600.
On that. Barz is very submittable. And like we mentioned, I think Barz's aggression makes it more likely that Lima will find a finish than Barz finds one of his own.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. All right, are you going to be in on Barz at all, or is he someone you're very low on?
See how much I'm getting of him. No, I'm really not getting much of him at all. I haven't projected to be like 16%. I'm coming in under on that at the moment. Yeah, I mean, he's also like finish or bust, and I just don't.
This line is going crazy. He's minus 485 on DraftKings Sportsbook right now. Lima is.
Yeah, so like that. Whenever you have a move that hard after weigh-ins, especially, it's like something's up. Something's going on.
Something's up. Yeah, I agree with you. He probably is a little better play, especially if the ownership does stay in check. We got AP ready for the MMA winners. What's going on, AP? Andy, morning, everyone. What's going on, Andy? Marquee Sports in the West Coast. It's too early. Yeah, it's a little early. I mean, it's like 8:30 over there. I mean, that's not that bad. You'll be all right. Ready for the MMA winners here. Let's move to the next fight here. The last women's fight on the card here, Dan. It is funny that the UFC, 3 out of the first 4 fights, Dan, it's just like, let's get these women fights out of the way. Let's get them all done pretty quick. So we got Stephanie Luciano versus Sam Hughes here. Hughes a 7,400 on DraftKings. Luciano is 8,800 on DraftKings. And Sam Hughes, the line on Sam Hughes, I bet it, what was it, plus 180 yesterday? Something like that. Maybe it was around there, 175. It's now plus 140 on DraftKings Sportsbook. So that line's moving in Sam Hughes' favor right now. I think this is a very interesting fight because Luciano is one of those girls where, in the last like 2 years or whatever it was, 3 years, 2 years, whatever it was, she's fought one chick, Alan Carr, who has no striking. She is all wrestling and grappling. in her last fight, she just kind of like stayed on the outside, picked her apart, wasn't afraid of anything outside of the takedowns, stuffed the takedowns, and, you know, kind of got an easy decision win. Sam Hughes is like the total opposite. Like, I don't think she's amazing anywhere except for the gas tank. She's got a crazy gas tank. She's going to keep going. She's going to keep pushing. And I want to see what Luciano does when Sam Hughes is just in her face the entire fight, because in the last fight with Luciano and Alencar, Luciano pretty much had Alencar backing up constantly. So when you have a wrestler backing up, it makes it a lot easier to stuff takedowns, makes it a lot easier to implement your game plan when you're not afraid of anything that's coming at you. And that's kind of what happened there. I don't think Sam Hughes is going to just back up. She's not going to do that. She's going to get in her face and stay there. So I like Sam Hughes as a bet. As a DFS play, I think she's okay as well, just because 7,400 in a win. You know, if she scores like 80, Dan, that could be optimal.
Yep.
So I'm going to probably have some Sam Hughes, but I definitely like it more as a bet. What about you?
Yeah, I have a really hard time getting to Luciano here. She, you know, this is probably a decent matchup for her to put up some good striking volume, but like that alone just isn't going to do it. She doesn't have a ton of wrestling or grappling upside. Matter of fact, like when Luciano faces wrestlers and grapplers, she drops a lot of minutes on her back, which, you know, Hughes, she's not like the best grappler wrestler, but she'll mix it in. And I could see her like putting Luciano on her back and keeping her down there for a while. You know, at 8,800 for Luciano, she's going to need a finish, and her inside the distance line is plus 525, which is pretty terrible. So I have a really hard time getting to Luciano. I'm much more interested in Hughes, especially given the line movement. Like we've seen Hughes put up usable scores in decisions when she's more expensive than this. Like she's put up usable scores at like 7,700. She's 7,400. And like I mentioned before, the dogs on this slate are just, you were really going dumpster diving here. And I think, you know, Hughes is, now she's a pretty good value, money line value. I think her inside the distance is still pretty poor. Yeah, it's horrible, but
it's bad.
But she can get there. She can get there with some takedowns, control, some striking volume. I don't know how likely it is that she's going to be able to execute that game plan, just because she is going to be giving up a lot of speed and physicality. But the line movement obviously has me more interested. The price has me more interested. We really don't know. Like we really don't know how good Luciano even is, which is probably why you're seeing that line movement. Is like she's not been tested. Hughes is not, she's not some amazing talent, but she's fought a lot of good girls in the UFC, and she's made a pretty good account of herself. Like she's tough, like you said, she moves forward, good cardio. So I'm not going to go crazy with it, but I will probably have. I'm almost definitely going to have more Hughes than Luciano, and I think she's solid dog.
See, but Dan, it's a lot easier to do some of those things in a game plan that you're talking about if you're moving forward. It's when you're moving backwards that it's a lot harder to implement, you know, wrestling or grappling or, you know, clinching or whatever. Like it's a lot harder, and that's what Alencar. She just didn't have the tools to like do it. You know what I mean? So, you know, I think Sam Hughes is definitely a good dog, just from the perspective of she's going to fight for your money. She's going to try her ass off. And that's what you want in a dog. You know what I mean? And I mean, even this morning, she just about 2 hours ago, she was plus 165 on DraftKings. I was looking at, you know, the lines earlier. So this thing keeps moving. The last 2 days, it keeps moving in Sam Hughes' favor. You got to like that. So I'm going to be higher on Hughes.
She's all effort. And like she will fight for your dollar.
Yep. Sure. Are you going to have any Luciano? I probably won't. 8,800 seems crazy.
Yeah,
Sam Hughes is durable.
You know, I'll mix her in probably like low teens, just because anything can happen in a striking exchange. Like even people with, like, we've seen people who we come on here and be like, they don't have one shot power, and they they just find the right spot on someone's chin and put them out.
Yeah.
So just for the randomness that happens in striking, I will have a little bit, but it's not really a spot I'm looking to get to.
I can't do it. You know, she couldn't finish Alan Carr, who is not good at all.
Yeah.
And that was pretty much an entire 3 rounds of striking. So the fight went exactly the way Luciano wanted, and she still couldn't really endanger her at all. Like, where I was like, oh shit, she's about to get the finish, like, at all. So I don't think it's going to happen against Sam Hughes.
Hughes has also never been knocked out. She's got, like, if you go on Tapology or whatever, she's got 1 TKO loss, but that was a doctor's stoppage. So, like, she's durable.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely way more durable than Alan Carr. So yeah, I'll take it here. We got Randall Gray, 8:30. I don't know what that means, but from the West. Yeah, I was talking about the West Coast time. That was a while ago, Randall. Stay up with it. Lima is up to 5-1 now on Hard Rock. Yep. That's what Alex Burner says. And we got Mangone. Even Mangone is in for UFC winner. You gotta love it when Travis Mangone.
Apex card.
Love it. When you're grinding the Apex cards, when the Fight Night Apex card is VETTORI DOLIDZE and you're grinding that card, that's when you know you're hooked, Mangone. You are officially hooked on MMA. I'm proud of you. That's a great win for MMA.
Is this not the most like Apex main event ever? Fucking VETTORI. VETTORI DOLIDZE 2.
The most. Like, literally, you couldn't get like a more Fight Night main event thing than DOLIDZE versus VETTORI. It's like absolutely the most here. So, and then we got Bean Air. Do I win a prize having 5 of my 6 golfers miss the cut? No. Now, if you had 6 of 6 golfers miss the cut, that is something that's more of an accomplishment, Bean Air. You got to be better. All right. You can't just have 5 of 6. That's not an accomplishment. I've had 5 of 6 miss the cut before. That's nothing. That's nothing. 6 of 6 though, and you're cooking with gas right there. So, all right, let's keep it going here. Now we got the men's fights, the rest of the card here. Carlos Vera versus Musasa. Josias Musasa, minus 750. Musasa is. Dan, now we're going to get to these really big favorites here on this card. And Musasa is one of them here, minus 750. It's got to be, I think, the biggest favorite on the card.
I have him at minus 900 now. I guess he's minus 750 on DraftKings.
So he's minus 750. We go DK Sportsbook, so that's what I'm reading off of. So, but I should phrase that on DraftKings Sportsbook right now. He's minus 750. And Carlos Vera is 525. Musasa is coming first fight in the UFC. He came off his Contender Series fight where he won I'm pretty sure it was a decision, where he kind of like, he got taken down a little bit, but he had a good get-up game. He's super athletic. He's got good hips, and showed it in that fight. Because even when he got taken down and looked like, oh, he could be in trouble. Like he found a way back to his feet and did it pretty quickly. So he's athletic. He showed that he could go for more than one round too, which I didn't know. Like, it was kind of like a question mark. Like, can he go all 3 rounds? And he did. He's got power. Carlos Vera is kind of, to me, like a one-trick pony, right? He's like, he wants to grapple. He's a grappling nerd. He's going to roll for knee bars, and he's going to do all that weird shit on the ground. Yeah, leg locks and all that stuff. And his last fight was against Nakamura. And the problem with that, he did all that stuff, Dan, and he had chances, but Nakamura just had the wrestling to kind of nullify his grappling. So the question is, will Musasa follow him to the ground? And if he does he have the wrestling to kind of counter the grappling? But if this stays on the feet, Musasa's probably just going to find a KO. So that's kind of, it's going to look like super easy if this stays on the feet, because I think Musasa finds a finish pretty early if this stays on the feet. The only way he can lose is if this goes to the ground. Like, that's the only way I could see Vera winning.
Yeah, and Vera's not a very good wrestler. So It's I mean, he can still get the fight to the ground, and it's like you really hate to fade guys who I mean, me personally, it's like when you've got a fighter who they like to use leg locks. Like leg locks, when you're back in the other side and the fight hits the ground and like the opponent just starts grabbing at legs and like that shit gets me clenched, because it's like, oh god, like anything could happen down here when somebody's going for leg locks. But I mean, I agree. If Musasa, super physically gifted, super inexperienced, powerful striker, has showed some pretty good like takedown defense and get up. So I think Vera is going to have a really hard time getting this to the ground, and Vera will have a massive disadvantage if this is on the feet. Musasa, this is going to be a running theme on this card. There are a ton of fighters on this card who are just like finish or bust. Like they don't profile as producing enough offense to score well without a finish. Musasa's all the way up at 9,400. His ITD line of -160 is solid, but it's not quite like Kevin Vallejos. I like targeting Musasa. I think there is quite a bit of downside risk here, though. Like because Vera's never been knocked out. Like he's not very good, but he's never been knocked out. So if Musasa doesn't find a finish, he's gonna bust.
The problem is that these guys will like follow Vera to the ground. So like on the ground, even if he's getting hit, he's still gonna like, roll for shit and kind of attempt shit, and it nullifies the striking a little bit for so it's annoying. Like Vera's gonna, in a decision though, he's gonna put up 13 again if he doesn't find the submission. So because like you said, it's not like he has like great takedowns or anything like that. So
he's terrible. Awful.
What I would do with this fight, I agree with you. Musasa's probably the play in DFS, right? Like if you want to go to this fight, if you want Vera, you just sprinkle by submission 12-1 on DraftKings, because that's the only way he wins. So if you think Musasa falls him to the ground, Vera's live to find a submission. Like that is definitely in the cards. So I probably won't play much Vera on this card here. I like other cheap dogs a little better than him, but I will probably sprinkle the submission prop just because 12-1 seems a little much.
Yeah, Vera, I mean, he actually rates out pretty well for me. Nobody's gonna play him.
No,
and like he could lock up a leg. Musasa is very inexperienced and really untested. So like we really don't know what he's gonna look like once the fight hits the ground. And it's like it's a bit tricky, backing someone like that against a seasoned grappler. I just don't have much confidence in Vera's ability to actually get the fight to the ground is the major problem I have with Vera. So
all right, Dan, I just bet it 12-1 on DraftKings. I bet the submission.
Let's go.
Sprinkle a little hundy on it, a little hundy spot.
We're gonna hit one of these like long sub props one of these days.
We're gonna hit one of these. Again though, like that's his only shot. So yes. I'm gonna sprinkle it here. He's not winning a striking fight.
It's like similar to Saruya last week, where it's like, okay, this guy's basically his only path to victory is a sub. So like, why not just bet the sub? That was a pretty frustrating.
Dude, Joshua Van too. He looked good, man. And his takedown defense was awesome.
Takedown defense was legit. You know what the problem is though? Is like Saruya really needs to he needs to develop.
He doesn't have striking, Dan.
He's just throwing takedowns without setting up, and it's like that's not going to work.
And that's why I love Joshua Van in that fight, because I was like, how is he doing it? Like he's gonna have to shoot on shoot, and he doesn't have like the Marab type cardio to just like do that and be successful.
He shot like 20
he needs
takedowns.
To set it up. Yeah.
He shot like 20 takedowns, and 80% of them were complete dog shit.
They were desperate.
Yeah,
and Joshua Van was just like waiting every time. He was just waiting for it. Like, all right, I'm waiting for you to do it. You're going to do it at one point. I'll stuff it and piece him up a little bit. stuff
Terrible
it.
recipe too with Saruya, who like fades as the fight goes on and Van builds as the fight goes on. So like once it hit the back half of the second round, you knew where that was.
Stuffing like 20 takedowns, Dan, that's got to be demoralizing when you're shooting that much and you're just getting stuff left and right. And you're not used to it, by the way. Like you're used to getting takedowns. So yeah. I really like Joshua Van. Also makes it harder too with those little guys, right? Like Joshua Van's like lower to the ground. So he was just sprawling every time. He was just ready. You know what I mean? And it makes it a little harder. But yeah, that was a good fight. I thought Joshua Van was very impressive. All right, let's move from the Vera Musasa's fight. I think we talked about that enough. Let's go to Su Young Yu. Sitting a minus 500 favorite to AJ Cunningham. AJ Cunningham coming off of a loss to Ludovic Klein, which was on 4 days' notice. And he fought that at 155, Dan. This fight is at 135. And I was worried, like with the weight, I was like, how's AJ going to look? Is he going to make the weight? And he made the weight. And I was like, okay, like he looked pretty good on the scales. He didn't look like, the weight cut killed him, at least to me when I saw him. So I was like, okay, that's good. That's one check mark here. And he's tough, man. Even if you watch the Klein fight, and I think Klein's a good fighter, man, some of the shots he took and just ate were pretty impressive. You know what I mean? He lost that fight. He got finished in that fight, and people will say, oh, well, he got finished early. But man, some of those shots he took and ate before he got finished were really impressive. Like he was getting hit in the face a lot. It was a body blow though that ended up putting him to the ground. So, Klein tried to KO him and finish him up top, and he just couldn't do it. And then the body, he got him with a few good body shots, and that finally got him down. But man, he's tough. He's got some grappling. I kind of like his striking too. Like I think he's going to have better striking than Su Young Yu, who's more of a wrestler and grappler in his own right. So I think if AJ Cunningham can stuff the takedowns, I think on the feet, he's going to look like the better striker. He's going to be the bigger fighter, Dan. He's 5'10". Su Young Yu they list him at 5'6". He looks a little shorter than that to me. And the reach advantage, he's going to have a big reach advantage. So I think AJ Cunningham could win this fight. I kind of like him here, plus 380 right now on DraftKings. Moved a little bit. I think he was in the 400 or 500s earlier in the week. So it's moved a little bit in his favor, if I remember correctly. But I'm picking Cunningham. I think he's a good dog to back. It's all going to come down to the takedowns. Can Su Young Yu get the takedowns and control him? If not, I think AJ Cunningham could win this fight. What do you think?
I think Su Young Yu will get the takedowns. I think he'll be able to find a submission at some point. Striking is not really Su Young Yu's game, but I think he also has enough power to eventually find a finish on Cunningham. Like Cunningham is tough, but his defense is horrible, man. Like he just gets hit. And he'll block punches with his face until he gets put out. I just think skill wise, he's at a major disadvantage here pretty much everywhere. The thing I do like about Cunningham that you already mentioned, like he will have a size and physicality advantage. And he fights with like a good pace and will just go out there and throw. So as much as I dislike his talent, he's got a puncher's chance, and he rates out fairly well for me because nobody's going to play him. Like if they've seen his last few fights, like nobody wants to play AJ Cunningham. So I'm going to have a little bit. I'll probably be a little bit over the field. Su Young Yu, I really like his like heavy wrestling and grappling style because I think he's going to absolutely need a finish to be optimal, but I don't think he necessarily needs like a first round finish, or even like, I think even a third round finish could have him contending for the optimal, just as long as like, the first 2 rounds he's controlling and, wrestling and grappling heavily. So he needs a finish, but he can find it in probably any round, which gives him a little more leeway. But at 9,500, it's tough with like these, like especially these like really skilled submission grapplers, because sometimes they win too efficiently. Like if you get like a first round finish from Tsuyu and it isn't a quick win bonus, and he just like gets a takedown and locks up a choke like 3 minutes into the first round, you're getting something like a 90 something, and that's just like not going to cut it at 9,500. So there's a lot of downside risk on Tsuyu Young here. I think the ownership reflects that. He's going to be probably around like the mid to low 20s. So I like taking my shots on him just because he has a ton of wrestling and grappling and finishing upside, though his finishing number has come down some. This is a fight that I'm not looking to go like too overboard on, because both sides have pretty big downside risk, but they've also got
the one thing also I'll say about Su Young Yu is like his striking literally does two things. He throws a jab and then an overhand right, and he ducks in and tries to take you down. Like it's so predictable with the size and reach advantage from Cunningham. He should just be waiting for it, trying to pick him apart and stuffing the takedowns. I do also think he throws at least combos. Like you'll see uppercuts with AJ Cunningham. He even hit Ludovic Klein with a few good combinations, in my opinion, in that last fight. So it tells me like the striking difference, I think, is more Cunningham than it is Su Young Yu. If I feel like you think it's closer, I think he's going to struggle. He could struggle to close the distance with the height and reach. And if that is the case, it's going to look a lot closer on the feet than what this line entails. This line entails that Su Young Yu gets the takedowns and he dominates him on the ground. But if he doesn't, I think this looks like a completely different fight. So I think I'm a little higher on AJ Cunningham, kind of lower on you, just because, I mean, you kind of brought it up. He needs like either a really quick finish, which I don't think happens, or he needs a bunch of takedowns and control time, which could happen. This is where I do think he could, in a finish in the third round, like a late finish, I think could get him optimal.
I think probably the best case for Su Young Yu is like a late second round finish where he's just dominating the grappling and wrestling for really two full rounds, then gets like the buzzer beater finish, gets like the 70 for the round 2, and then you're cooking. But
also Su Young Yu, I've seen him get tired. I mean, like just a year ago in the road to the UFC, I watched him like sit down, not on a stool, like on the ground after the first round, and his corner's telling him, don't show that you're tired. He's tired too. Don't show him you're tired. So the corner knows he's already exhausted after one round, and they're telling him, don't show him you're tired. He's tired too. Like it was pretty wild to me. He did gut it out, and he obviously won the decision, fight there. But I was just like, whoa, like that's pretty wild. They were saying that after just one round. So I've seen him kind of hit the gas a little bit and gas out. So, well, it'll be interesting if this does go, long, and he does have to shoot a bunch early if he can continue the pace here. But all right, that's Cunningham and Su Young Yu. I think it's the first fight we disagreed on, Dan. So first fight of the it only took us like five or six fights. So we got there. First fight. Let's go to the next one here. Waldo Cortez-Acosta, Ryan Spann. This is another fight. The line is moving in Waldo's favor. Dan, it's up to -218 on DraftKings. It was like -175, I think, earlier this morning. So this line keeps moving. Waldo, I mean, he beat Despania, but I mean, that was just like one guy had a very big hole and he exploited it, and obviously won that pretty easy decision.
Yeah,
you can make the case that like the competition, Ryan Spann's fought much better competition for sure. He's losing to most of those guys that are better competition, but I'm just saying like he's fought more talented guys that he is losing to. I do think, though, with the line moving in Waldo's favor, I do think Waldo probably wins. I think a decision, honestly. I think this is a decision fight. I like the over 1.5. It is up to -175, though. So, whatever. But I do think that Waldo wins probably a decision. I don't know how well that's going to score unless he's going for takedowns again, which Ryan Spann, you got to be careful because Ryan Spann, if you do try and go to the ground, he's tricky. He can get submissions and, jump the chokes and stuff like that. So I don't think that's what happens. I think this fight plays out more on the feet here, which might not score good if there's no finish, Dan.
You're gonna want to finish from either of these guys. Like I said it before, I'll be saying this a bunch. Neither of these guys really throws enough offense to score well without a finish. Yeah,
it's 2025. We could say that shit now.
Yeah, I don't expect Cortez-Acosta to pursue any kind of wrestling. Like that was a very specific game plan against Espana, who like you said, massive hole in his wrestling and grappling. Like he was able to take him down once at the beginning of every round and just lay on him because Espana had absolutely no clue how to stand up. We were actually on Cortez-Acosta as a really big dog there, so I know
his decision remember was like 12-1 or 14-1 or something.
I know a lot of people hated that fight, but I was having a great time. I bet Acosta. I was over him in DFS. Like I was having a good old time. This matchup though, it's interesting because Spann, the book's kind of out on him. It's like he's got 1 round of cardio and he'll come out aggressive. He'll try to knock you out for 1 round. But as soon as you get out of the first round, his cardio just falls off a cliff and he's there to be had. This is his first fight up at heavyweight. So, you never know exactly how these things are going to go, but it's possible that the weight cuts were contributing to his durability and cardio problems. So he might look a little better up at heavyweight. Yeah, it's just that both of these guys are knockout or bust. I'm a little more interested in Spann just because he is more urgent going for finishes. Like Waldo Cortez-Acosta, his finishes are just more from like attrition, and he'll get them in the later rounds. But he's happy to just sort of like chill at range, box you, whatever. Not an urgent finisher at all. So I really don't love him for finishing upside, even though I think that line has also moved quite a bit.
Here's the thing, Dan. I think Ryan Spann, we talk about this all the time, but I think Ryan Spann makes it like him a perfect type of fight to maybe bring it out a little bit more in Waldo if he's pushing for the finish on Waldo, right? He's not going to be afraid of Waldo taking him down and controlling him, right? He's not afraid of that at all. So it's not like he's going to be afraid to throw stuff out there and go forward and stuff. So I think I agree with what you're saying. I'm just saying, like, I think the fight style might make Waldo a little bit better play than we think because of how Ryan Spann fights.
Yeah, that's entirely possible. I just don't love it. Like, they're better finishers, like in this range. They're going to be
Did you see Spann in the weigh-ins? Did you see what he looked like?
I didn't. I heard he looked fat, but it's like
he looked like the doughboy. It was funny. It was funny on Ryan Spann. He looked funny. So and Waldo actually looked good. Like Waldo looked like pretty good in my opinion. So
Waldo's a good athlete. I mean, he's not necessarily. He's one of those guys who's like a good athlete that fights.
But he looked like more cut at least for Waldo. Than what I'm used to seeing from Waldo. So.
It's just tough because he doesn't like I don't love his odds of getting a finish, even though the opponent obviously helps, right? Like Spann can be knocked out. Spann's cardio is terrible. He's aggressive, so he'll force the action. Just seems a little thin to me. I have a hard time playing a lot of Acosta, but I'll probably just have to grit and bear it because I think There's definitely finishing possibilities here. Let me just organize this by.
And it's not like these guys are like super trustworthy either. You know what I mean? It's not like these guys are, especially Ryan Spann. But
I mean, now that I actually look at it, in his range, like you've got DOLIDZE, Spann, and Dos Santos, who are all kind of around his finishing odds. He's pretty solid option. I just don't like it. I just do not like it. The volume is there.
DOLIDZE, VETTORI. Who's the other guy? Who am I missing? Spann,
No,
Acosta.
DOLIDZE, Spann. Yeah, it's like DOLIDZE, Spann, and Dos Santos are like have the better kind of finishing.
Which fight do you like more for finishing out of those three fights? Because you got the Dos Santos Chidi. That's kind of close, like price wise.
I like that one more.
Yeah,
for sure. But we'll get to it. But Dos Santos and Chidi are both. They're more violent strikers on both sides. They both have durability concerns. Like I think that fight definitely ends in a finish. But we'll get there.
Yeah, I think you're right. If I had to pick between the two fights, I'd probably pick that one too. But all right, so you're a little higher on Spann for DFS
yes.
than Waldo. Are you picking Waldo though? Because I have Waldo. Are you picking Waldo?
I have Waldo by decision, which is why I don't love him for DFS. Because again, both of these guys are relying on a finish to be optimal.
I think Waldo wins by decision as well, but I think I'm also for DFS. Even though I get what Dan's saying, I think I'm going to sprinkle him in just because I think he's going to come in a little lower. And, the line is moving, more heavily in his favor. It feels like as we get closer and closer to the fight. So I'm going to be a little higher on him, probably be a little lower on Spann. But yeah, it is an interesting fight. If it goes to decision, I think it's going to be a shit fight. So hopefully.
Just another like heavyweight slop fest where they're, both fucking breathing heavily, leaning up against the cage. Like, oh God. That's kind of what I'm envisioning, which is probably why I have a hard time.
Even though I'm going to play a little Waldo, just because I think his ownership's going to be a little lower, I'm envisioning that happening too. Like that's what I think happens.
He just doesn't go for finishes, man. He's not an urgent finisher, which I hate. I hate playing in DFS.
Yep. Yeah, that's fair. Let's move it on here. We've got Soo-Young Woo Choy. I think I said that name right, but I could be totally off there against Kevin Vallejos here. Vallejos, a dangerous striker, likes to move forward. I think he thinks in his head that fights are only a round and a half, Dan, because he likes to fight like it's like there's not that much time to go in the fight. He's dangerous. He's 9,100 on DraftKings, Choice 7,100. This is another pretty sizable line here. Kevin Vallejos sitting minus 470 on DraftKings Sportsbook. Choice sitting plus 360 here. Choi's been finished early in a couple of his fights recently. I think 2 of his last 3 fights, he's gotten finished in the first round. Fight in the middle was a decision fight, but I think we see violence, Dan, and I think this fight finishes early. I mean, Choy has some power too, but I really like Vallejos here. I think this fight ends under a round and a half. I like the under, and I think Vallejo finds a KO. What do you think here?
I think he does too. Sungwoo Choi, he's been knocked down. He's been knocked down in his last 4 fights, and he's been knocked out in 2 of them. So durability, obviously a concern. If you watch Vallejos, like he's got really, really nice boxing, man. He pressures forward. He throws a ton. He mixes his targets really well. Like you'd love to see. You don't see it as often as you should, but like he'll work the body as well. Like he will throw combinations at your body and wait for you to drop your hands, and then just fucking throw a missile at your head. So, I mean, I really like him as a prospect. I think he's going to be in a lot of fun fights. Sungwoo Choi, Vallejos has the best inside the distance line on the card at minus 275, which is exceptional. On the other side, Sungwoo Choi, he's a very one-dimensional striker. His inside the distance line is plus 850, which like, if all you're offering is striking, that's that's just not going to do it for me, man. Like, I have a really, really hard time getting there. All I can really say is he's really cheap. All the dogs suck. He's got way more experience. Like, he's fought good fighters. He's beaten Yusuf Zalal. He's beaten Juliana Rosa, who are two, like, it's solid competition, but man, his durability just doesn't seem to be there. And yeah, this is going to play out entirely on the feet, and I think he's going to be pretty outmatched here, and probably gets knocked out. So I'm really interested in Vallejos, despite the fact that he is going to be probably the highest owned fighter on the card. I don't care. Like, that's chalk that I'm down to eat.
You want to hear something crazy? So Kevin Vallejos, you probably remember this, Dan. Kevin Vallejos, his first round of the Dana White Contender Series fought, which was in 2023, the first time he fought, he lost his fight. It was a unanimous decision loss. He lost to Gene Silva, who is an absolute beast. So he went 3 rounds with Gene Silva. In that fight, Dan, coming up to that fight, he was a minus 180 favorite going into that fight over Gene Silva. He was 21 years old during that fight. So that just tells you how good this kid is. He was a minus 180 favorite to Gene Silva. He lost that fight. Then he wins 3 straight. He comes back on the Contender Series, obviously finds a finish. This kid is no slouch.
Cam T. Like, that was not competitive at all.
No, but it's just wild when you look back and you're like, my God, Gene Silva's an animal. And he went 3 rounds with him, obviously lost, but that's still impressive that he went 3 rounds with Gene Silva, honestly. Yes. And, that kind of shows you that even when he's losing to his one loss to Gene Silva. Yeah. So, yeah, this kid is good, and I think we see a pretty fun finish here in this fight.
And just to make the case for Sungwoo Choi, even though I think he gets knocked out, like, there is a chance that Vallejos could draw him into like a high volume striking battle. Like, this is another one where, like, your opponent is going to bring it to you and maybe force you to throw more volume than you're used to. So if Sungwoo Choi, if it's a competitive striking battle, I think Sungwoo Choi can put up a useful score in a decision at 7,100. So there's some viability there. He, like, the threshold he needs to cross to be usable, it's not a particularly high bar, I think maybe even just a win of any kind could get him there. But I don't think that happens all that often, man. I think this Vallejos kid is, a lot of times we see Contender Series fighters come in overvalued. Like, you could argue that you could argue that Musasa is a little bit overvalued here. You could argue that Nurgajai might be a little overvalued. I don't think that's the case with Vallejos. Like, I think he's good.
Yeah, I think he should be where he is. Yeah. Whereas I can make the case that a lot of these big lines are wide. Even if I like the favorite, they're wide. I don't think this one's wide, honestly. I think this one is, I think he should be this big of a favorite. So we'll see. Sounds like me and you both on the Vallejos train. Probably will be popular for DFS, but I don't care. I think he should be, honestly. So
I'd be really surprised if he wasn't the highest known fighter on the slate, because I also think that people are going to. I don't think people are going to play the 5-rounder all that heavily. So, and Vallejos is only 9,100. Like, that is cheap for what he offers offensively.
Yep, I agree. Let's go to another Contender Series guy coming in for his first fight here. Dayar Nurgaziev. Nurgaziev minus 380 on draft. What did I mess that up?
You're not even close, man.
Was it that bad? How do you say it?
Nurgajai.
Oh, I was never getting that one. Okay. I was never getting that. All right. Nurgajai sitting minus 380 there. Brenton Ribeiro sitting plus 300. Dan, I mean, I think this fight finishes, but one thing, Nurgajai was 5 pounds over the limit. Love pretty that. Decent weightness here, strategic, whatever you want to call it. The one thing I'll say about Nurgajai that I think is interesting is he is not one of those big dudes that's going to come out there and just run through people. He's patient. He likes to wait for the finish. He likes to let the finish come to him. I remember watching his Contender Series fight, and he threw the first left high kick, and I was like, "Ooh, that's sneaky." Like if he could catch this dude, because I didn't expect it at all, and then all of a sudden I saw it, I was like, "That's pretty nice." And then later in the fight, he finds the KO with that left high kick, and I was like, "Damn, I knew it." That thing's pretty sneaky. So he's got power, but he's patient with it. Kind of like Pinto, the Pinto fight, Lane, where he's kind of like a little patient. He's kind of that way. Ribeiro is, I think, gonna, try and push things a little bit, but I think this fight ends in a brutal knockout, and I like violence here, so I think it's a good fight to attack. I do think Nurgazayev does probably win this fight, but what do you see here?
Yeah, after Vallejos, Nurgazaye's got some of the best inside the distance odds on the entire card. The thing with Nurgazayev, I mean, yet another guy who is going to bust without a finish. Like, he needs a finish. He does not throw a lot of volume, like you said. He will walk his opponents down, but he picks his shots pretty intentionally. Like, he throws with a ton of power and is looking to knock you out with every strike that he throws. He doesn't really wrestle. Like, when you see him wrestling, it's because his opponent has initiated the wrestling exchange, and like, he's competent there, but it's not like you can rely on him to put up lots of wrestling and grappling offense. So pretty much a striker. You mentioned the weight miss. I love it, man. Like, he was minus 400. He missed weight by 5 pounds, which, it's a double-edged sword, right? That can either mean it could either be really good or really bad. But to me, when you miss weight by that much, it means that it's not like, oh, I missed by a pound. I tried to cut and I just had a really bad cut and now I'm fucked up and I miss weight. It's like, no, dude, you missed by 5 pounds. Like, you didn't even try. So I love that. He went from, again, minus 400 to minus 450. I think his inside the distance odds went up. And, Ribeiro's been knocked out in, I believe, 3 of his last 4 losses. Ribeiro's another one who, he's 7,300, but he needs a finish to score well. His last fight out against Machado, I think he scored like 50 in a decision win. And it's like one of the worst fights you'll ever see, dude. It's horrible. But Ribeiro's got some power. He is a BJJ black belt. So if it hits the mat, I think a sub is definitely on the table. Ribeiro is regrettably probably my favorite cheap dog, just because I think he has the most finishing upside out of anywhere. Like, definitely 7,500 and below, and his finishing odds are comparable with some of the better finishers, like right above him. If I just look real quick, I think his finishing odds are kind of right in line with Holobaugh and, well, no, they're actually, his finishing odds actually went down quite a bit. So Holobaugh's got much better finishing odds. But down here in this super cheap range, I think he's live. Because, Nurgazayev, he looks good, but, largely untested. I like targeting both sides of this fight, man. Because like you said, I think someone's going to get finished here. And again, if someone's not getting finished, then this fight is busting massively.
Yeah, I know. I think it's a good fight. I definitely think it's a fight you could target both sides of for DFS. Who do you have winning, though, Dan?
Nurgazayev.
Yeah. Okay. Me too. What are you getting for ownership on these guys?
Let's see. Nurgazayev, I've got at 32%. Ribeiro, I've got at 17%. Probably come in around the fit. Like, there's some really set, like, unlike last week where the top end was kind of barren and all the options were sort of like whatever. There's a lot of really strong options up in the top end this week, so I'm probably going to be pretty spread out there. But Nurgazayev is definitely one of my favorite targets, especially given the line movement, given the opponent. Yeah, but there's significant downside there, man. It is fully a boomer bust play. Like, if this goes to the second round, you're probably not going to be too happy.
Not unless Ribeiro wins. No,
Oh yeah,
no,
I mean, well, Ribeiro with a third round finish even could, because that's like 45, maybe with a takedown. That's a little dicey. I think like because I don't expect Ribeiro to be dominating at any point. It's like we talked about you earlier, where it's like maybe in a third round finish if he's completely dominating the first 2 rounds and the third round up until he gets it. Ribeiro, I don't see him doing anything dominantly. If he gets the sub, it's going to be like, oh shit, he got the miracle sub that he needed. So you're probably going to need that in round 2 at the very least.
Yep, I agree here. We agree on that fight. Let's go to the next fight here. Nurgajayev looks like he does not train. I mean, maybe by design. Who knows? Let's go to Blackshear and Cody Gibson here. Blackshear sitting minus 440. Looked a little rough on the scales, Dan, but maybe a little tough weight cut for Blackshear. But we know him. He's dangerous. He's got massive grappling skills. Cody Gibson can wrestle. I think he will try and wrestle in this fight. So I think this fight's going to come down to who wins those exchanges. You know, last fight, Cody Gibson, his wrestling won out. And he kind of easily dominated and controlled it with his wrestling. Blackshear is definitely more dangerous on the ground. He's got very good submission skills, very good grappling skills. So it will be interesting to me because I do think Blackshear is live to find a submission.
Yeah.
But if he doesn't, it's interesting because I do think, you know, if he doesn't find a submission and gets a little too comfortable, maybe on his back, Cody Gibson could ride out 2 rounds of a decision win. So I think this is another fight where you could play both sides. I talked about AJ Cunningham as a good dog. I think for like cheap plays down there, I think Cody Gibson is probably another decent DFS play because I think if he wins, he's having success with takedowns and some control time. What about you, Dan?
Yeah, that's kind of the problem for me though, is like Cody Gibson, his most likely path to victory is probably a wrestling heavy decision. The problem is like once the fight hits the mat, Blackshear is far more skilled.
He's in danger.
Yeah. Blackshear he's going to have a physicality advantage. He's got a massive grappling advantage. Like Cody Gibson can be submitted. So that it's a really tough, it's just a really bad matchup for Gibson is what it comes down to. You see the steam coming in on Blackshear. I think Blackshear's inside the distance number has been getting steamed as well.
Yeah, I mean, I bet his submission number because I do think that's how he wins. Just because of the way Cody fights, I think he's going to be live for a lot of this fight to find a submission.
Gibson's inside the distance number is plus 1,200, which is putrid. It's awful. So
I don't think he's. I don't think he's submitting Blackshear. Like
no, I just like it really just comes down to the fact that this is a terrible matchup for Gibson because again, like his best path to victory is usually to wrestle and get the fight to the ground, but as soon as he gets down there, he's gonna be in trouble. Like I don't think he's gonna want to get down there. And when it comes to the striking, like neither of these guys, like we just saw Blackshear get flatlined in about 20 seconds. So neither of these guys are particularly.
Cody Gibson doesn't have that type of power though.
No, absolutely not. And like neither of them are particularly good on the feet, but Blackshear throws a little bit more volume. He's a little bit more active. So I think I have to favor him there. Like, I think there's maybe a misconception about Gibson from that Brad Katona fight that like, oh yeah, he'll go out there and throw a ton of volume. That's not usually what he does. Like that was complete outlier performance. So Gibson, I think actually rates out the worst for me out of every single fighter on the card. So I will personally have a tough time getting to him. I think Blackshear rolls here, man. Honestly,
Brad Katona style brings that out of most people.
Yeah,
just because of his style. Like look at Brad Katona's fights. You're going to see a lot of, bangers with a lot of strikes, and it's just the way he fights. So we both have. Do you have Blackshear inside the distance? Because I do think he finds a submission.
I do, yeah. And I mean, honestly, if this goes to decision, he's probably going to lose because Blackshear. I don't think Blackshear's never won a decision. Like Blackshear inside the distance is his win condition, and also obviously his condition for finding the optimal.
Cody Gibson is 20-1 for KO submission, both 20-1, and his decision is plus 500 on DraftKings. Like if he's winning a decision pretty much. So
is this an $8 one too? Yeah, like we've got. I mean, Blackshear's 30, but Cody Gibson's 37. Man, he's a family man. I think he's actually like a teacher. It's like for Cody Gibson, like fighting is not his whole thing. You know, this is like kind of a thing he does on the side.
I think Cody Gibson is tough. You know what I mean? I do think he's tough. Yeah,
he's definitely tough. So probably not going to get knocked out. But man, his defensive submission grappling,
guys, you can still get subbed. You know what I mean? It's like he can still get subbed. And Blackshear, that's where he's the most dangerous, is finding those submissions. So
Blackshear far more skilled on the mat, far more skilled.
Yeah, I will say though, I think for Blackshear, even though I do see him like getting a finish, I think I'm still going to have a little bit of Cody Gibson just for if this fight did go to decision and he is super cheap. From a DraftKings perspective, I don't mind. Like I like him more than Vera in that cheap range. I think I like him more than Barz. Just looking at these guys. So I will have a little Cody Gibson. Will you have any Cody Gibson?
I will. I'll have probably around low teens, maybe. Just because I play everyone, but I like he rates out really poorly for me, like really poorly.
All right. So Ribeiro, we already talked about the Ribeiro fight. We both agreed that from a DFS side, it's probably a good fight to have both sides of. Blackshear didn't shake his hand at the weigh-ins. Yeah, I saw that, Henry. Dan, we're gonna get to this, but how often does fading the main event end up optimal?
In 2024, was 15% of the time. So not that much. We are currently on like a 4 or 5 week run of the main event not hitting the optimal. Although last week, some of them were weird circumstances, right? Like the Song Cejudo fight, it kind of ended weirdly with like an eye poke. So third round finish without much volume. What else? I mean, we've had some weird ones, man. The Cobb fight, that was also like a weird third round finish where there wasn't much volume. And third round finishes don't score very well. Last week, Ankalaev missed the optimal by 2 points. So to answer your question, this year it's been happening a lot, but I tend to think that that's kind of more of like an outlier
imagine that too. Like he didn't get takedowns and he missed by 2 points.
Yeah.
So if he gets one takedown, he gets in the optimal. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. It's been rough.
Imagine before the fight, I said, Dan, listen, if you lock Ankalaev, all he needs in this 5-round fight is to complete one takedown, and then everything else he will be optimal if he gets one takedown. You would like hit the lock button so fast.
Yeah.
One takedown. I'm telling you, if he gets at least one takedown, this fight goes 5 rounds, he is optimal. You'd be like, lock. And then he doesn't get the takedown and he isn't optimal. That's pretty crazy.
It's been rough too, because I mean, like I do what I say, and I come on this show every single week. I write in the article every single week. Like I am playing 100% of these 5-round fights, and I've just been getting absolutely wrecked. That's
what happens. What was the one before it? The cop card, where I had all cop had to do was score. What do you have to score? 91. I think it was.
Yeah, I mean, they've been falling short, but not by much. Yeah. Like it's been really thin margins here.
Yeah.
So
all right. It's been annoying. I agree with you.
I'm gonna keep banging my head against the wall though, dude. Like I'm not like It's one of those things where it's like the first week where I'm like, okay, I'm going 80% on this main event. It's going to be giga optimal and I'm going to be frustrated as hell. So I'm just going to stay the course.
All right. Let's go to the next fight here. Alexander Hernandez, minus 205 right now on DraftKings Sportsbook, or minus 198. Keeps flipping between Kurt Holobaugh plus 164 on DraftKings Sportsbook. Holobaugh sitting 7,600 on DraftKings. Hernandez 8,600 on DK. Dan, I'm just gonna say it. I don't trust Alexander Hernandez. I didn't think he beat Hubbard in his last fight. I thought he lost that fight. His face, to me, if you just put both their faces next to each other, his face told me he lost that fight. Like, literally, I didn't get that split decision. I thought it was crazy, especially the one judge gave all 3 rounds to Hubbard, and then the other 2 had a 29-28 Hernandez. Is what it is. But I thought he lost. I thought Hubbard did enough, especially with the damage to Hernandez's face, to get that decision. But he won it. Now he faces Kurt Holobaugh, who is tough, in your face. Won with the striking last time out against Krzyzewski as a slight dog. And he kind of just outdogged Krzyzewski. Also, Krzyzewski just kept trying to like submit him, going for those like front chokes and darces and jumping guillotine, and it just didn't work out. Like, it just didn't work out. Kurt's pressure, pace, striking ended up winning him a 3-round decision. And I think, not that Hernandez is going to jump a bunch of submissions, stuff like that, but I think Kurt's pressure, his pace, his striking is going to win him a decision here. I like the dog, plus 164. I already bet it. It was, I think, plus 180 earlier this morning. I bet it at plus 180 on DraftKings Sportsbook. And yeah, I think this fight goes to decision. Hernandez is tough. He definitely wears damage, on his face, but I just don't trust him. I don't trust him. I'm not going to play any at 8,600. I'm definitely going to have some Kurt though, because I think he's got upside at his price tag. What about you?
Yeah, Hernandez is just like, he's way too expensive for the offense that he typically like puts out there. His inside the distance line is plus 350. It might actually be worse now because I see Holobaugh. Like, since I updated the odds before we came on, and Holobaugh was sitting at what, plus 182. Now he's a plus 160. So there's like mega steam coming in on Holobaugh.
It feels like that's happened with a lot of fighters since we've been on the show. Because I looked at like these guys this morning, and now I feel like a bunch of lines have just steamed one way in the last hour or two.
Yeah. So yeah, like you said, Holobaugh, I mean, I like his style for DFS. He's really aggressive. He comes forward. He throws a lot of volume. There's not really all that much wrestling or grappling going on. He's actually pretty poor defensive wrestler. So a lot of downside for Holobaugh kind of lies in like, he will get taken down and he'll lose minutes and get controlled. But I'm not as worried about that in this matchup, just because, he's 7,600. He's probably, I mean, dude, this inside the distance number that I have written down here of plus 225 is by far the best in this lower 7K range. I think it might be the best for all the dogs. Ryan Spans is slightly better. DOLIDZE is about the same. So yeah, I'm gonna load up on Holobaugh, and like you mentioned, Hernandez at 8,600 is just far too expensive. Way too expensive. Yeah, like, far too expensive. And he might even. My one hesitation with Holobaugh is that this might not really be the best matchup to reach a ceiling, because Hernandez, he slows fights down, he limits exchanges, so it might be hard for Holobaugh to get off as much offense as he usually does. But I mean, it's really it's really no.
He likes to move around in the cage. Kurt's gonna want to try and pressure him up against the cage, cut him off, and Hernandez try and use his footwork and keep moving. So that can slow fights down. But I mean, Kurt's volume and his price tag, and like you said, the inside the distance number, he is definitely one of the better, DFS dogs on this card.
Also, helping matters is they're in the apex with the small cage. So as much as Hernandez likes to avoid exchanges, like the small cage is going to help with Holobaugh kind of trying to force the action. He's got a really, Holobaugh might actually be my favorite dog because like I've got Dubin, Vera, and Cunningham who all rate out slightly better, but Holobaugh is so much more likely to win than any of them.
Yeah.
So I like Holobaugh a lot.
And not just win, like he can put up a big score in a win. Yep. Like he has that, in even in a decision win too, which is always nice. Like a lot of these guys we talk about, we're like, he needs a finish. If he doesn't get a finish, he's probably not gonna like. Even in a decision win, Holobaugh could score pretty good. So, yep. All right, we're both on. Did you bet, Kurt, or?
I haven't yet. I was looking at the site and I picked Hernandez by decision, which I think there was probably Well, the line.
You still got time. You still got time to flip. So you take your time, figure it out.
I might flip that one, but I mean, as far as DFS goes, I have very, very little interest in Hernandez. Like I will probably be low teens on the off chance he can land a finish, but that's just really it's not super likely. And he's going to be owned. Like I have Hernandez projected to be around like the mid-20s in ownership, which seems
that's crazy.
Like that's higher than I would want. Like maybe if he got down to like the low teens, mid-teens, then I'd be like, okay, like let's maybe there's some validity to sprinkling him in as like a contrarian option, but he's not even going to be that low owned. So I have a super hard time getting there.
Yep. Yeah, I won't be playing any Hernandez. I got a bunch of betting Kurt. Let's go to two more fights left on the card. Chidi and Cuani, plus 164 on DraftKings Sportsbook versus Aleksei Dos Santos, minus 198. Dos Santos sitting 8,400 on DraftKings, and Cuani sitting 7,800 on DraftKings. Last time out against Zach Scroggins for Dos Santos, he did find a finish. Scroggins probably shouldn't even been in there, but
that was a slate where Dos Santos was 7K flat, I think, and Scroggins was the late replacement. So the conversation was like,
he was 8K, yeah.
Like, do you jam him or like do you try to fade him? And I fell on the I think I locked him. I played him in 100% of my lineups, and then he went out and just dusted Scroggins.
Yeah, he was 8K and 9,500.
I'm always gonna play those massive misprices. Like I'm always like. I've talked to JBC about this before, and the way JBC kind of approaches things like that is like a full-on fade and full-on jam are basically the same thing, So just like pick your poison. And for me, whenever there's a massive misprice like that, I'm gonna basically lock it every single time.
Yeah. I mean, there's no reason to even go the field at that point at the ownership it's going to be. So JBC is 100% right. You're either going all in or you're out. You know what I mean? It's one or the other. It's either failing or you're winning. And in a way, like as long as they win, it can't really like hurt you in a lot of those things unless he just gets dusted right off the bat. You know what I mean? Like
right.
So
even a underwhelming win, like that time we had Gutierrez. I think he was the one who was flat 7K, massively mispriced. He scored a 56 and was still optimal. So like the floor is incredibly high when you have misprices that bad.
Yep, I agree with you. What do you got here in this fight, Dos Santos and Cuani?
I lean Dos Santos pretty heavily, but like both of these guys are going to go out there. They're going to go out there. They're going to stand and bang. They both got, great power, and they've both got durability concerns. So like, I think someone's going to die in this fight, and I'm going to be heavy on both sides, man. I think the line's been moving towards Dos Santos pretty heavily. So I've picked Dos Santos inside the distance, but I could really see this one going either way. I don't think we see any wrestling or grappling here. So again, there's always there's always bus risk with that. Like, you're not getting any peripheral stats. So without a round 1 or round 2 finish, it's going to get a little dicey. But yeah, man, I think someone's going to get killed here, man.
Yeah, I got Dos Santos 2 winning. I'll just say you're a little more confident that someone gets killed in the octa. I could see a decision. So I think I'm going to have more Dos Santos, but I could see you getting both sides of this fight. You know, in playing both sides in DFS, it wouldn't stun me if Chidi found a finish. But I will probably be a little heavier on Dos Santos. I feel like I have a lot of dogs, and so yeah, I probably lean a little more on the Dos Santos side, but it's not one fight that I'm like super strong about. You know, it's one of those fights where I'm like, yeah, I think I lean that way. I'm going to bet Dos Santos, but you know, from a DFS side, I could see it going either way, I guess.
Dos Santos has the best like finishing odds for the price. He's plus 120 to win inside the distance. Yeah. He's 8,400. Like, there isn't a single better like inside the distance value on the entire card. Chidi, I'm kind of surprised that his inside the distance number is so poor. It's plus 325, but I think some of that may be due to the fact that Dos Santos, I don't think Dos Santos has ever been knocked out. But the thing is, and what the stats won't show you, is that like he's been getting hurt. Like, he's been getting hurt. It's just, okay, he's been knocked out once. He's been getting hurt and just not knocked out, but he can be hurt and knocked out. Like, that is fully on the table. So I think this Chidi inside the distance number is a bit wide. Maybe not, given the heavy line movement towards Dos Santos, but I think Chidi's got a better chance of landing a knockout here than the odds imply.
All right, that's Chidi and Dos Santos there. Let's go to the main event on the card. Marvin Vettori minus 148 on DraftKings Sportsbook versus Roman Dolidze plus 124 on DK. This from a DraftKings DFS perspective, Vettori 8,200, Dolidze 8K. We did see this fight a little while back, about 2 years ago. Dolidze did lose a decision. Vettori pretty much out-volumed him, right? And that's been kind of one of his problems. He slows down in fights as the fight goes on later, and the volume's not always there. So, Dan, is there a reason why we would think this fight could play out a little differently this time around?
I mean, that's always on the table. I would be kind of surprised, though. Like, when I broke this down, I do expect it to play out pretty much entirely on the feet, unless Dolidze can get it to the ground. But I think they're going to be content to just kind of stand and strike. Like, Vettori, the thing about him is like he's really good about attacking his opponent's weaknesses. And one of the better parts of Dolidze's game is like his submission game, especially off of his back. So I don't think Vettori is going to be looking to take him down or grapple him, just because Dolidze is dangerous on the mat. I think Vettori does have a striking advantage. You know, he throws more volume. He's a little bit faster. Dolidze's got crazy, like, he's got sick power, though. Like, he can end Vettori in one shot. And Vettori has not been a finisher. I don't think he's finished anybody in like 10 years or something ridiculous like that. So with Vettori, you are relying on him putting up a ton of volume to be optimal here. But it's not necessarily a great matchup for that, because Dolidze is like pretty defensively sound. He does not absorb a ton of strikes. So there's quite a bit of downside risk on the Vettori side. And I think, even though I think Vettori wins, I think Dolidze has a higher ceiling as far as DFS goes, just because if Dolidze wins, it's going to be a finish. Like, it's going to be a submission or it's going to be a knockout. He's not winning a decision. Like, Vettori has awesome pace, awesome cardio. He can throw a shitload of volume for 5 rounds. Dolidze can't. Like, Dolidze is going to gas as soon as we get deeper into the fight. And I mean, it sort of opens the door for maybe a late round finish for Vettori, like his first finish in a decade almost. So yeah, I mean, all that said, there is some downside risk here. I think Vettori could put up you know, he could put up like 100, 150 strikes, 150 significant strikes. But if there's no takedowns and there's no control time or any of that, then even at 8,200, it's possible that he, you know, scores in the 90s and misses the optimal. Like, that's fully on the table. And yeah, DOLIDZE is like, I mean, just his win condition and his condition to make the optimal, it's finish or bust, which is fully on the table. He's totally capable of doing either of those. So I think Vettori wins. I'm probably going to be playing DOLIDZE a little more heavily, but I'm going in 100% on this fight, and I'm just going to live with the results. If it doesn't make
I mean, I've been back and forth on this fight. I get what you're saying about Vettori probably winning the decision. Shoulder issues that he's had, that does worry me a little bit. And I think this is a really close fight. I don't necessarily think that one guy's going to fully dominate over the other. I do think the later the fight goes, it will favor Vettori. Yeah. Obviously, I think earlier in the fight, it's probably going to favor DOLIDZE. So, man, I keep going back on it. I think I'm going to lean DOLIDZE. I think that this fight could be a little different. The key for him is just going to be, you know, can he limit, obviously, the damage, the exchanges coming at him, and can he throw a little bit more from a volume perspective, which I think he's got to think in the back of his head he has to. So we could see a little different in a 5-round fight from a pace perspective, which could get him tired a little quicker, obviously, if he does that. But I think he kind of has to, and I think he knows it. I don't think there's going to be a ton of wrestling and grappling, at least success. But I do think he's good enough to probably win. Marvin's kind of, and I like Marvin Vettori, but he feels like he's on his way down, right, Dan? Just a little bit. Okay. So I think I'm going to go with DOLIDZE. I think I'm going to switch up my pick and go with him. But from a DFS side, I could see you playing both sides of this fight. I will be heavier on Roman just because I do think he wins, and I'm normally heavier on those guys, especially those guys who I think have the better chance to win by finish, which I would say he does, because like Dan said, Vettori hasn't finished someone in literally 10 years. I think 9 or 10 years. So yeah, I'm going to be on him. Again, another fight where it's like, I'm not like crazy confident on my side, but I will lean that way, and I'll take the plus money on DOLIDZE and take my shot here. So that's all the fights. Dan, we got to give our best bet for this card before we get out of here. Dan, you got a favorite bet for the people?
Yeah, man, I'm going to go with a sub prop here. We're going to do Blackshear by submission, which is plus 225 on DraftKings Sportsbook.
Blackshear, I like that. I already bet that. I'm into it. Now I will preface by saying I think I've hit like 4 or 5 in a row of my favorite bets the last couple weeks. So been on fire. I'm trying to keep the streak going here. I'm between two. I think I'm going to go with a money line dog here. I'm going to go with Kurt Holobaugh, plus 170 or whatever he is right now. I got him at plus 180. But I like on DraftKings Sportsbook, I like him as a dog. Nice plus money. Probably wins by decision, but I think he has upside to get a finish. I think he could get a finish, so wouldn't shock me there. But if you want more bets, DFS picks, the playbook, Dan put up a whole write-up article for the slate today. You can check us out at runpuresports.com. RPS 15 for 15% off if you want that to get in on all the winners, Golf Showdown, MMA, NBA, you name it, we got it. All the bets for all the sports, the college basketball, all the bets for March Madness, the conference tournaments. We got you covered over at Run Pure Sports. Use that code RPS15. If not, hit the like button on the video if you enjoyed the video. It was fun breaking it down. Dan will be back next week, same time, same place. Again, good luck in your DraftKings contests for Dan and myself. We'll see you guys next week. We're out of here. Peace.